Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. Today's video continuing my long series of ranking or counting down my 100 favorite albums of all time. I am now at number 17 on my list, which is the very famous Beatles album, Let It Be, which came out in 1970 by, obviously, the Beatles. Anyway, so yes, great album, great to talk about here on Jason the Old Millennial. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well here on a Wednesday afternoon. And yeah, come back to you to talk more about some of my favorite albums of all time. Still going down my list that I started about 2 years ago. And number 17, so we're in the top 20 or at least, so it can close the top 15. And as you saw in my intro, we were talking about my favorite band of all time, band I've talked a lot about. Just finished a ranking every single Beatles song a couple weeks ago or a month ago, I can't remember. And so still trying to cover this series as well. But yeah, we got Let It Be, which I got on vinyl here. Obviously, big fan of the Beatles, so I have to have a lot of Beatles albums up pretty high. So I haven't talked about the Beatles too much in my albums list because I have some really great ones that are really high on my list that I'm now just getting to. Including this one, Let It Be, which came out in 1970, like I said. It was basically their last album. If you're talking about UK albums, it was the 12th album that came out. If you're talking about within like the Beatles canon of albums, it's considered the 13th album because the Magical Mystery Tour is really a US album that they kind of added into the UK albums, kind of make this kind of 13 album canon, I call it, of the Beatles. That it feels like you have to own if you're a Beatles fan, which I don't own all of them yet, but I'm eventually get there. But yeah, Let It Be, interesting, of course, history behind it. They started this album before Abbey Roads, and it was the whole idea of doing, Paul McCartney kind of had this idea of doing shooting a documentary while they make the album. And of course, if you watch the Get Back documentary on Disney Plus, Peter Jackson, you get like, I don't know, 10, 12 hours of footage of them, maybe not that much, but you get tons of footage of them just sitting around, trying to come up with songs and rehearsing and realizing pretty quickly that they're not going to make the deadline. I think they were supposed to do it like in 2 weeks, but it became pretty apparent they're not going to be able to write, enough songs and rehearse them and get ready to do a concert of some kind with it. Anyways, it was an interesting idea, but just even the Beatles, as good as the Beatles are, it's an impossible task. And they had a lot of infighting. George quit during the middle of it, and they had to change a lot of plans. And then they ended up only coming up with, I don't know, 4 or 5 songs maybe from the whole thing, I want to say. And Let It Be, I don't know if that's not even like a song that really comes out of the whole thing. Paul McCartney worked on it, and then eventually they had to come back and come up with more songs to fit this album out. So it took a long process because it was a pretty difficult process overall. And so, there's some interesting things, like they didn't have George Martin doing the producing like they had. George Martin produced like all their albums. And then they brought in, I think, Jeff Emmerich, but then they didn't like what he was doing. So then they brought in Phil Spector, who finished it. And Paul McCartney especially didn't like what Phil Spector did to the album. So a lot of problems there with making the album. And I think George Martin was a little upset probably that he wasn't, they didn't have him in there. So then after they made this album, it was kind of a bad experience. So they decided to do one more album to have like another, just end on a high note, I guess, to have a good experience, and brought George Martin back. And then they did Abbey Roads, and that came out before this one came out, even though this was started before. But eventually this came out right when they broke up. Basically, they were broken up at this point, and this album came out. So it was the last hurrah for the Beatles. And it's very underrated. It's ranked very low amongst most Beatle fans. Ranked as pretty low in the list. It's pretty high on my list, actually, higher than even Sgt. Pepper's, higher than Abbey Roads, which are considered the two like probably best albums of all time. I even like this better than those because obviously some of the most amazing songs come off this album. Some of my favorite of all time are off this album. Plus, it's fairly consistent throughout. There's a couple bad ones, but still, yeah, still a wonderful album. It came out with 3 singles, 3 really great songs coming out of this, especially all 3 hit #1 in the U.S., and that was Get Back, Let It Be, and Long and Winding Road, all hit #1 in the U.S. Get Back also hit #1 in the UK. Let It Be hit #2 in the UK, so it didn't even get to #1 in the UK, which is kind of shocking because that's one of the greatest songs of all time. It was #2 on my ranking Beatles songs list, so really high on my list. And then Long and Run Road, I don't know if that even came out in the UK. They also put out Don't Let Me Down. Also, they recorded that during this time. Didn't put it on the album, which is like, that kind of sucks. Like, if they could have taken off, like I'll say, One After 99, terrible song. I wish that wasn't on here. And then Maggie May and Dig It are just stupid throwaway songs, and they're like maybe less than a minute long, but it definitely brings the album down a little more. Like if those weren't on there and they put Don't Let Me Down on here, this would be like a top 10 album for me for sure. It would be an amazing album, but those 3 songs kind of hurt it quite a bit in my opinion overall. But yeah, still some great stuff here. The album overall went #1 in the UK and US, of course, like all Beatles albums go #1 because everybody loves the Beatles at this time, especially. And yeah, everything they do is pretty great, I think, in my opinion. So, of course, it goes #1. But yeah, so like I said, yeah, some of the greatest songs of all time. Let It Be, one of the greatest songs. I mean, come on. I mean, they named the album after it. I know it was #1 for Breyer, #2 for me. It's almost on anybody's top 10 list, I would think, of like greatest songs. I mean, wonderfully written by Paul about his mom, and just amazing piano in it as well. You know, you start off with Two of Us, by the way. Two of Us, great song. Another song that hit pretty high on my list of top Beatles songs. I think it was in my top 25, top 20. And it's like the last great duet by Paul and John. Because they were kind of doing, at this time, the Beatles were kind of already kind of separating themselves. They were kind of having their own lives. They weren't touring, of course, and a lot of times they'd go in the studio by themselves and record their own songs, and they're doing most of their stuff by themselves and not really working together as well, in my opinion. But Two of Us, such a great duet by those two, and the 2 acoustic guitars, so good. Dig a Pony, I think, is actually a very underrated song. I really like this song. It's a John song. A really cool guitar intro. I love the guitar on here. Definitely showing how much they've grown as musicians, I think, and as a band. But yeah, Dig a Pony, I think, is a really good song. Nobody really talks about it. It's a weird title, but yeah. Cross the Universe, another song that was like in my top 20 favorite Beatles songs of all time. Absolutely amazing song from John. I Mean Mine, another underrated song on here by George. Actually, one of George's best, I think. Has a very interesting, I think, in the Let It Be, and Get Back. I got those mixed up. Get Back, the documentary, we see George, I think, talking about how he kind of came up with this idea for a song with a kind of a waltz to it. And he kind of came up with this idea of I Mean Mine, which is supposed to be, you know, this ego thing, you know, and some, you know, dealing with philosophy and stuff. But anyways, yeah, actually pretty good song overall. You know, I've Got a Feeling, decent song. Not one of my favorite, but, you know, not a bad song by Paul. Long and Winding Road, again, underrated song to me. It was in my top 5 favorite Beatles songs, and people don't enjoy it as much, and there's criticism because of all the extra orchestra. Maybe it's too sappy, I don't know. But I love the orchestra music, love the piano, love Paul's vocals. Another really good written song. Love that. For You Blue, another song I'm not super crazy about. It's okay. It's not bad. Another George song there. And then you end with Get Back, which is actually a decent rock song. Overall, it kind of almost seems like going old school. Paul's tapping into almost like a 50s style rock song or something like that, but it works very well. And also Billy Preston's keyboard playing is just really amazing. It really helps that song, I think, in total. But yeah, it's interesting. Last album, one of their best, actually, even though there was so much trouble in the studio and making of this thing, it's still, they come out with, as the Beatles always do, one of the amazing albums of all time. Even won a Grammy and Oscar for Best Musical Score, interesting enough. Not for the album itself, but just because they made it into a documentary. So the documentary won awards because they had the Beatles music in it. Anyways, but yeah, so yeah, again, great album. one of my favorite Beatles albums. Had to have it up here pretty high at number 17. Like I said, it would be higher if they would have taken off 109, one after 99, Maggie. Dig it, take those off, but Don't Let Me Down. Oh man, this would be an even bigger album. But yeah. So I'll go to my top three, and how could you do even top three? I mean, there's so many great songs on here. Like Two of Us didn't make it in there. Get Back didn't make it in there. And those are, I think, really good songs. But I mean, the top three are all like in my top 20 favorite Beatles songs of all time, just to tell you how great these songs are. Number three, I have Across the Universe on here, like I said. And I've talked about this, of course, when I did my rankings. You know, John, just really interesting lyrics, and I love the acoustic guitar in the intro there. Really cool song, and really good work by John vocally. Number two, I have The Long Winding Road. That was in my top 5 favorite Beatles songs of all time. Just love the piano, the orchestra, like I said, and Paul's vocals, and his writing is just top notch. And, you know, it's almost like an allegorical, whatever you call it, analogy type song of life being this long and winding road. You know, it has troubles and all this, but then he says, you know, but it leads me to you. So there's a happy ending to it. There's a hope in there. And then number one, it has to be Let It Be, of course, the name of the title of the album. I said it was number 2 on my favorite Beatles ranking. Overall, it'd probably be my second favorite song of all time, for counting all songs together. I mean, I just absolutely love the song. I've heard it a million times. Still gets me when I listen to it and hear that piano. And Paul singing about his mother, and Mother Mary Speaks to Me. And it's a very hopeful song of, you know, letting things go, not worrying about things and stuff like that. So it's got a great message behind it, plus just amazing work there. And I love, and there's a single version, of course, and then there's this album version. I think the album version has George Harrison's guitar solo on here. I think the single doesn't, maybe, or something like that. Whichever it is, I love George's guitar solo. One of his best guitar solos, I think, with the Beatles. One of the best solos in the Beatles discography. I absolutely love that, putting it in there. But yeah, Let It Be, amazing song. Definitely helps this be one of my favorite albums of all time. Against most people, what they believe that this is not as good as I think. But yeah, so still, absolutely amazing album. Let It Be at number 17 on my list. And please comment, what do you think about Let It Be? Is it too high, too low, or where's it on your Beatles favorites? You know, everybody has a pretty big opinion about this album. And yeah, just comment what you think about it and what your favorite songs are, all that. I'd love to read it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And just want to thank everybody for watching this video. Thank you for watching the series in total. I really appreciate anybody watching me talk about my favorite albums. Definitely fun to dive into and analyze and talk about, and all that. Let's discuss with other people as well. Anyways, but yeah, so thank you for watching. Thank you for liking the video, and especially thank you to all my subscribers for supporting the channel. I really appreciate you all, and hope you have a good day.